Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of the Willow Cove Crafts podcast, a podcast about knitting and sewing and my other crafty endeavors. My name is Emily, and you can find me on both Ravelry and Instagram as Willow Cove Crafts. Today is Saturday, January 15th, 2022, and I am coming to you from just outside of Madison in Verona, Wisconsin. It has been about a week since I last recorded, and again, today is Saturday. I am recording a little bit early this week. We unfortunately got the sad news that one of my uncles passed away after losing his battle with cancer. So Dan and I will be traveling tomorrow to attend his funeral. So it's been a pretty sad week, but making videos brings me a lot of joy. So I thought since I had the time today, I would still try and get an episode out for you all. Since recording last week, Dan and I haven't really been up to much, so I don't have any video clips to add to the end of this episode. Yeah, like I said, it was kind of a sad week. The only thing that really happened was I did have an MRI on Wednesday, completely unrelated to my shoulder. Those of you who are new here, I've been having some pretty major health problems related to some vein compression in my shoulder. And then amongst all of that, I had kind of forgotten that I was also experiencing some exercise-induced leg pain, completely unrelated. And then I got the reminder that I had an MRI this week, and I had kind of forgotten all about it. So yeah, I went in and had the MRI. I have a little bit of tendonitis in my ankle, which is what is causing my symptoms. So nothing too serious, just some rest and maybe a little bit of PT. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Other than that, I have been doing a lot of knitting. I have this candle here, and I am questioning whether or not it's a good idea. It's really close to my yarn, and I feel like I am asking for an issue, but we'll leave it there for now and hope that nothing happens. There's birds outside. This is a completely side tangent, but I love the birds. However, there is a nest on my porch, and the nest was built last spring, and now I think because it's winter, the birds are using it as a bit of a shelter. And there's a lot of poop that is produced near the nest. So while I am happy for the birds and want to create a safe space for them, there's a lot of poop, and I don't know what to do about it. Anyways. All right, to start off our knitting content today, I wanted to talk about what I am wearing. This is the Raina shawl by Andrea Mowry, otherwise known as Drea Renee Knits. I knit this up last spring, I believe. I think it was actually one of my first finished objects that I ever showed on the podcast. But I knit it out of Brooklyn Tweed Loft. And the two colors, the white is Fossil and the orange is Ember. And I absolutely loved knitting this shawl. It's got a lot of interest. There's short rows, there's garter, there's stripes, there's two-color brioche. The bottom edge has this really pretty like arrow shape. I think Andrea Mowry has used this pattern in a couple of her, or this stitch pattern in a couple of her patterns, and she says it looks like little knit stitches, which I agree with. And I really like this shawl, especially if you are one of those people I hear a lot who maybe has trouble styling shawls. I think this is a really nice one because it is a long, shallow crescent. And because of that shape, I think you can almost treat it more like a scarf when you are styling it. And I think that makes it a little bit easier to style. Maybe if you're new to shawl wearing, or again, have not quite had success in making them look how you want. I definitely recommend maybe giving this one a try and seeing if you can get it to work for you. And then I also recommend knitting it out of the Brooklyn Tweed. I think that is what is called for in the pattern, but Brooklyn Tweed is also one of my absolute favorite yarns. It is a bit more rustic. I believe I always get them mixed up. I think it's woolen spun. It's woolen spun and worsted spun, and I know the difference between the two, but I can't remember ever which one goes with which description because they both start with W, and I have trouble with that. But anyways, the way that yarn is spun is it's spun with a lot of air in it, and so the yarn itself is, you may have heard people say that Brooklyn Tweed is a bit fragile. When you tug on it, it comes apart pretty easily. However, once you knit it up, it makes a pretty strong fabric. And because it has all that air in it, it's very light. So I've got this really big voluminous shawl that is not too heavy, which I think if you were to knit this same shawl in, say, a sock yarn, like a superwash merino nylon blend, it would be a lot heavier. It would hang a lot heavier, versus something like the Loft. You know, it's very light, it's very voluminous, it just like puffs up and sits really nicely. So yeah, I definitely recommend. I think this is one of my absolute favorite things I've ever knit. And then I did record a little video clip of me putting this shawl on today, just to kind of show you how I typically wear it and style it. And hopefully that is helpful to some of you who are always looking for new ways to style your shawls. So I will insert that here. All right, so to style the Raina shawl, what I typically do is I will wrap it around my back like this. I always find it's easier to start with your shawl in the back than in the front, if that makes any sense. But I will take, let me show this to you one more time. There's kind of this, I call it the short end because this is where, you know, that starting point is. It's closer to this end of the shawl. And then we've got this long end where each of the wedges is a bit wider. So anyways, I will wrap this around my shoulders and I will take the long end and I will kind of drape it over my left shoulder to create a bit of an anchor. And then I will take the other end and start to wrap. And I like to do it pretty loosely. I don't want to, you know, strangle myself. And then I will wrap that over my right shoulder. And then what I like to do from there, I prefer that the right side is longer. I don't like when things are too symmetrical. So I will actually kind of shift so that that right side is a bit longer. And then I like to tuck. So I've got this stuff in the front and then I take that right side and I kind of tuck it under. And I don't personally like having this big wedge kind of on display in the center. So I'll kind of like zhuzh that under and then kind of spread that out. And then if I'm feeling really fancy, I will keep that right side kind of wide over my shoulder. And then up front, I always like to make sure with this shawl that that beautiful kind of chevron-y bit is on display. And yeah, that is how I typically style my Raina shawl. I really like this one because it has a lot of volume without being too heavy. You know, I don't feel like I'm being overwhelmed by this shawl, but it's also covering most of my torso. And then, you know, obviously you can kind of shift it to make the ends as long as you want. Yes, one of my personal favorites. I have no finished objects for you today, so I will hop right in to works in progress. I have continued to stick with my goals of mostly monogamous knitting. I spent a lot of time working on my main sweater project this week, and then I also worked on a secondary project when I was unable to work on my main sweater project. So I will show you my progress on both today. So to start, my main project is the same one that it has been the last couple weeks. I am knitting a pattern out of this book by Linka Neumann called Wilderness Knits. And the pattern I am making, let me hold it up so you can see the spelling. The pattern I am making is called the Foyka sweater. And again, if you're looking for this sweater pattern, it's got that O with a dash through it. So I don't quite know how that changes the pronunciation, but I'm going with Foyka. And it is a super chunky, warm, outdoor style sweater, knit out of a bulky yarn. So I've showed this a couple times at this point, so if you are a returning viewer, I probably sound like a broken record, but I am using the yarn that is called for in the pattern, which is the Alafosslopi. And that Alafosslopi is an Icelandic yarn made by Istex. Again, it's a bulky weight, and the pattern calls for 3 colors. So my main color is this really, I think it kind of like bridges the gap between cream and tan. It's kind of right in the middle there, but this is color 9972. And my 2 contrasting colors are this brown, which is color 0085. And then I'm actually on my last skein of this red, which is my other contrast color. And this is 9962. I will put all of those colors in the show notes. They're not named, they're just numbered. But anyways, here are my 3 colors together. And since last time, let me get myself situated. I had joined the arm and sleeve last time and have since been working up the color work yoke. Because it's color work, I only really worked on this in the evenings. I always like to take a project with me, like out and about to work if I have, you know, certain types of meetings that I can knit on. And this was too complicated to use in those scenarios. So most of the progress you see here was done in the evenings after work. But here is where I am at. Last episode, again, I had just joined the sleeves. Let me find, I have a marker here. Hopefully you can see this marker. So basically I was right above this diamond section, and I have since I don't want to lose my stitches. I have since knit up from there. And it doesn't quite seem like a lot lengthwise. However, this felt like it took a while because this is, you know, if you're familiar with circular yokes, that point, that widest point where you've got your chest and both of the arms going, that's a pretty big circumference. So it was a lot of knitting. And then also, I've mentioned this before, but this sweater does a lot of color work with 3 colors at the same time, which I don't find difficult. However, it is a little bit more time consuming, in my opinion, than 2-color color work, which in and of itself is also more time consuming than just regular knitting. Yeah, the 3-color, I think the hardest part is just yarn management and making sure that you're keeping, I think I talked about this in a different episode, but, you know, kind of maintaining, I always think of color work as being in levels. You've got a bottom color and a top color, and you want to be consistent with how you carry those. And so 3-color color work is a very similar concept. You've just got a top, a middle, and a bottom color. And you just have to kind of maintain those as you go. And yeah, you obviously can't do knitting with 2 hands like you would with 2-color color work because you've got 3. So, you know, there's some interesting yarn management that goes along with 3-color color work, but once you kind of get in the swing of it, it's not too tricky. Yeah, I am obsessed with how this looks on camera. It looks so good. I tried this on a couple days ago and it is fitting great. I put that in my Instagram story if you happened to see. And yeah, I think I've got maybe 16 more color work rows. And then there's a couple decreased rows in there. Circular yokes will have rounds of consistent increases or decreases as you go up. So because I'm working bottom up, I will be decreasing. So the rows are getting a lot faster. I have completed my last row of 3-color color work. And so from here on out, it's just 2 colors at a time, which is nice. And yeah, again, my rows are going to be getting smaller from here on out. And then, yeah, I think it's 16 rows of color work left. And then I have, this sweater has a really big ribbed turtleneck. So yes, maybe once I get done with the color work, I'll be able to take this out and about again because the ribbed turtleneck is obviously pretty simple to work on. This guy is pretty heavy though, I must say. It's pretty huge. The one modification I made to this pattern was, so like any other sweater, if you're familiar with sweater construction, you will put underarm stitches on hold. That's a pretty standard thing with yoked sweaters. And I was noticing that the number of stitches she calls for you to put on hold will throw off the alignment of the color work on the sleeves. So what I mean by that is, you'll notice, so I'm really nervous I'm gonna lose those stitches. So all of this color work up through these diamonds was knit on the body and then the sleeves over here before the 3 pieces were joined. And then you've got kind of this section of brown, and then this color work right here is started when the 3 pieces have been joined together. And the way, there's a couple ways you can do it, but I decided to kind of align this top color work so that there's these points kind of pointing down in between the diamonds. But with the numbers she gave you to take off for the underarms, I realized that those points would not align on the sleeves. They would be kind of shifted, you know, over a stitch or two. And I did look really closely at the pictures in the pattern, and that's how it is. It's not something you would like ever really notice unless you were looking really closely. But I noticed right away, and I was like, I don't know if I like that. I think there's some finagling that could be done to make the whole thing line up. So essentially what I did was I I put fewer stitches on hold on the underarm. I think I just did, because it's a 6-stitch color repeat. So I just put 6 stitches on hold, which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, this is like super bulky yarn. So 6 stitches, you know, that's from, you know, there's 6 stitches in between each of these, you know, little spikes down here. So I thought, you know, especially due to this sweater being a bit oversized, that I could get away with putting fewer stitches on hold for the underarm, and then that got my numbers correct so that that color work would align on the whole circumference of the sweater once I joined the sleeves and the body together. I hope that kind of makes sense. But yes, it's so pretty. So yeah, hopefully, I'm trying not to put pressure on myself to be like, hopefully I have this done by next week. I'm knitting mostly monogamously. It'll get done when it gets done. But I think there's a pretty strong possibility that this sweater will be a finished object next week. At least it will be, you know, on the blocking mats drying. So, yes. Really excited about this. I've been working on this a total of like 2.5 weeks, which is kind of crazy that I've got almost a full sweater in that time. But that's what happens when you knit with bulky weight. Here's our folded up. I love it so much. Anyways, more to come on this, but I think she will be finished up really soon here. Since I was unable to work on my Foyka sweater for all of my knitting situations this week, I decided to pull another project back into the rotation. I shared a little bit about my plans to do this last week, but again, you know, whether I'm on a meeting or like talking to someone, colorwork is not always the best option for knitting, so I decided to pull in a simpler project to work on during those times. So I picked out a unfinished whip that's kind of sitting in my unfinished project pile. And it is the Illuminate sweater by Andrea Mowry. I started this sweater, can't remember exactly, August or September. There was a knit along. This was Andrea Mowry's Rhinebeck sweater pattern this year. She releases a sweater pattern for Rhinebeck every year, and I decided to join the knit along. So I got pretty far through the sweater and then abandoned it for some reason, which is something I do often that I am trying to fix about myself. But anyways, I had gotten through all of the kind of complicated stuff at the top, and now, you know, the body and the sleeves of the sweater are just plain knitting. So I thought it would be a perfect candidate to pull back into the rotation for my simple knitting project. Before I show you my progress, let me talk about the yarn. So the Illuminate uses 2 different yarns. The first one, and I don't know if you just saw that. I saw a fungus gnat out the corner of my eye. I talked about this last week. I have fungus gnats on my houseplants, and I'm trying desperately to get rid of them. I purchased some diatomaceous earth, I think is how you say it. It's kind of like the big guns of fungus gnat treatment. So hopefully that will come soon. Anyways, I digress. The yarn I am using is not quite what's called for in the pattern, but similar. So my kind of main color is the Spincycle dyed in the wool. I believe the pattern calls for Spincycle Nocturne, which is very similar. I think it's just dyed on a sheep or a wool with darker wool. So it makes the colors like a little bit more moody, because obviously if you dye something on a gray yarn versus if you dye it on a white yarn, it's going to come out a little bit differently. So anyways, basically the same yarn, just a little bit different. So anyways, this is Spincycle's dyed in the wool. This is their sport weight yarn, and it is a 100% American wool. And I was kind of surprised to see this, but this yarn is superwash. And the reason I say I'm surprised is that I am able to spit splice this yarn, which is not something you can typically do with a superwash. So I do question, even though this is a superwash, I think it's probably minimally superwashed. You know, if that sort of thing is important to you. This is the Rusted Rainbow colorway. And yes. So using that, and then it also calls for a second yarn, which is a mohair held double. I am using the Isager silk mohair. This is a 75% kid mohair, 25% silk, and this is the rose colorway. So again, the mohair in this pattern is held double to create, you know, you've got a sport weight, and then holding the mohair double makes kind of a fingering weight. So it's a very interesting yarn combination that creates a really interesting texture on the sweater. But anyways, let me show you where I'm at. So again, as a reminder, I picked this up out of my unfinished project, and I did not knit all of this since last week, but here is my sweater. Gotta watch out for my candle, make sure I don't set myself on fire. Since last time, I put a marker on, but I was kind of in the middle of this stripe here, where my macaroon stitch marker is. This is from Sucre Miniatures. I don't talk about my accessories a lot. I should really do that more. But anyways, this little stitch marker is from Sucre Miniatures. She does amazing little food stitch markers. They're super cute. They're super realistic. Definitely go check it out. But anyways, I put on a couple stripes and I have started, it's a little early, but this final stripe that I'm on is actually the ribbing. So I am almost done with the body. So yeah, it's got this really nice color work at the top. Again, I did this months and months ago at this point. And then the body and the sleeves is just stripes using your two different yarns. And you can see those pink stripes for me is that mohair held double, and it creates this fun little floof. And then the Spincycle, if you are unfamiliar, part of the reason this yarn is so popular is because it's super cool and does this like color shifting as you knit through the skein. So yeah, about 4 stripes done on this week in my times of needing simple knitting. Yes, what else to say about this? Not much. I will continue to work on this as needed, but it's, you know, knit up pretty quickly. The stripes kind of help things move along a little bit. But yeah, maybe my next episode I'll have finished the ribbing on the bottom and we'll have started with one of the sleeves. Again, this is kind of a secondary project. It's definitely not going to be getting the full attention that my Foyka is getting, but soon enough, this one will be done as well. I had this idea that maybe I would start doing a little bit of a product spotlight every episode, just sharing with you some of the knitting accessories I really like. I don't know like how often I'll do this because I feel like eventually I'll run out of things. But yeah, I thought, you know, as I have things, I would share them with you as things you might potentially get for yourself to help make your knitting just a little bit more enjoyable. What I'm going to talk about today is really popular these days, so you've probably heard of them maybe, but in case you haven't, this product is amazing. All of this is not sponsored. This is my own opinion. I bought this stuff myself. But what I wanted to talk about today is the knitting Barber cords. They're also called TKB cords, but that's just an acronym of the company name. So the company is the Knitting Barber. And they come in this little tin, and they are essentially just these little like tubes. Let me take one out without dropping the rest of them on the floor. It comes with two 30-inch cords and one 60-inch. So I just happened to grab the longer one, dropping things every which way. So yeah, essentially there are these cords and they're hollow. I don't know if you can tell. And what you do with these is, so I just have my sweater here. These will actually, you stick your needle in them and just give it a little push, and it kind of works like a finger trap. That was a bad example. Give it a good push, and then it works a lot like a finger trap where that cord just kind of sticks onto the edge of your needle. And then you would do that to the other end as well. And you do kind of have to like really push them on, but you know, just give it a tug to make sure it's secure. And then what can happen from there is now I've got this nice cord in place, so I can kind of shift my needles onto, or excuse me, shift my stitches off of my needles and onto that cord. And now I can try on my sweater. So I used to, you know, when I wanted to try on my sweater, just take a second needle and thread my stitches onto the second needle and then go try on my sweater very carefully so I wouldn't lose stitches as I was trying it on. But this kind of solves for that. You put this thing on your needle and then, you know, there's no need to like thread a second needle through your stitches. It just kind of shifts onto this like cord. You try on your sweater, and then when you're done, you just can kind of, you know, you have to be a little careful with it, but you just kind of pull the cord and the needle back out and you're back to knitting again. But yeah, I think it makes the process of trying on your sweater just a little bit more easy. And for me, at least, that means I'm going to try my sweater on more frequently and hopefully have better fitting sweaters as a result. So if you are like me and find trying on your sweaters a pain because you have to like put it on waist yarn or put it on a second needle, get some of these, try some of these. They're amazing. I really love them. And then when you're done, you just kind of like, I just like use my nails and grip it and pull, and it just comes right off. And you're ready to go. So anyways, those are the TKB cords, otherwise known as the Knitting Barber cords, and I love them. I bought mine from Firefly Fibers in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. They have an online shop, so go check it out. Looking ahead to this next week, I do plan on recording again next weekend. I mentioned that I am hoping to start making this podcast weekly. More of the same. I'm gonna keep working on my Foyka sweater, maybe finish that up. And then when I finish that, if I finish it this week, my plan after that, I mentioned a few episodes ago, I am working on a long-term blanket project for the year. And my plan is every time I finish a, for lack of a better word, like regular project, I plan on putting about 10 stripes on my scrappy granny stripe blanket. So I showed that a couple of episodes ago. But you know, I've been working on the Foyka sweater, and so once that is done, my blanket will be owed a couple stripes. So that will be what I work on next. I think my blanket has like 13 or 14 stripes on it currently, so I will probably try to get it up to about 20 stripes, just kind of round out to the nearest whole 10 number, and from there I'll think about what I want my next cast on to be, which I have a pretty good idea at this point what I want to work on next. But yeah, I'll talk more about that later. I'm pretty sure that's as far as I'll get within a week. So finishing my Foyka sweater and then maybe working on my granny stripe blanket a little bit, and then obviously keep working on my Illuminate sweater when I am unable to work on my main projects. So yes, I think that is about it for me this week. If you enjoyed watching this, please like it, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment. I love interacting with you all in the comments. It really brightens my day to hear from you all. And I will chat with you again in about a week. Bye, everyone.